Sometimes I feel that manufacturers try to overcomplicate things for no real reason. Now, case in point is the BenQ Mobiuz EX3415R. Now, this is a 1440p ultra-wide IPS monitor that runs up to 144 Hz, has HDR 400 and AMD FreeSync capabilities. In this review, we're going to see if it lives up to the billing, and furthermore, if it's worth its asking price, because it can be found for around £900 in the UK and around $1,000 in the US. Now, to kick things off, we're going to talk about the OSD, and the reason I'm starting off this review with the OSD is because there's a lot of settings that I'm referencing throughout this review, so it allows you to kind of get your head around it. Furthermore, in order to access the OSD, you'll probably want to use the remote control that's included. It's nice to see that BenQ have included one, because the joystick button that's found underneath the monitor sits right next to the power button, and therefore if you're going to be accessing the OSD regularly, you might accidentally switch off the monitor instead, which I just think is poor button placement by BenQ. Now, accessing the OSD, you can go into the menu option, and here you've got inputs, and of course you can see here I'm connected over DisplayPort. Now, there is this mode called Scenario. Now, Scenario is effectively a way of it automatically detecting your source and therefore giving you different options per source. I talked to Adam from PC Monitors, who did good in terms of explaining me what the use case of Scenario is, and quite frankly and personally, I just don't see any point in it. I think it's overcomplicating what the user needs, and in this respect it's just something that I would just leave disabled. Now, through the quick menu you can see you've got the standard mode, and this is just effectively the quick menu, so when you go into the OSD for the first time you can see these certain options. It's nice to see you can customize it per different mode. If you're on the Scenario off, the game and cinema options will be grayed out. In terms of color mode, if you're a gamer, and I presume you're going to be watching this review, then I would suggest you using custom mode. The reason why is because it gives you a little bit more pop in terms of the colors. And we're going to talk about color accuracy further down in the image quality section of this review. However, what you should know is that it's not going to be color accurate in terms of the sRGB color standard, or color gamut should I say, but will be the one that will give you just a little bit more eye candy. If, however, you're a gamer and or you want to be doing some professional photo or video grading, I would highly suggest you running the sRGB mode instead. You can see automatically a lot of the options are then grayed out as a result, but fundamentally the AMA section is not, so therefore you can still game in sRGB mode. And furthermore, the brightness is not locked in sRGB mode, which is fantastic. So moving back to custom mode, we're going to go down to multiple inputs, and here you've got, as the name might suggest, multiple inputs that you can enable, and you can enable in certain portions of the screen, kind of PIP or PBB mode. Now, as for the eye care section, it's pretty much as the name might suggest, and here you've got low blue light, color weakness, and the duration. Now, BI Plus can only be enabled if you enable it through the color mode, as you can see over here. When you do enable BI Plus, other options will be grayed out, so for example the brightness over there, and here now via the eye care segment, the adjust duration is disabled, but BI Plus becomes enabled, and it gives you the light meter and sensor sensitivity. It's a little bit of a mouthful, or tongue twister should I say. For me, I don't use the option, but of course you might like to use it, and that is for you to decide. Now, as for the audio, I'm actually extremely impressed as to what BenQ have managed over here. I've reviewed over 180 different monitors and have reviewed over 400 audio related devices, and I can safely say this is the best sounding monitor, period. To give you a little bit of a snippet, here's a short little audio demo.
My imagination is constantly racing 1,000 miles ahead of me. Then in my own mind, it's floating, I'm always hoping. But when I reach the brink, don't stop to think, I always sink and down.
Now, while an audio demo over YouTube is never ideal, it just gives you a little bit of a taster. Now, in my opinion, I would use the Pop Live EQ function because it is effectively giving you a better balanced sound signature. The other modes seem to overbloat the bass or indeed cut out the mids. And just for your information, BenQ have added two 2-watt speakers and a singular 5-watt woofer, which is just great to see. As for the system menu, it is again pretty much self-explanatory. The most important part potentially is the information segment, which allows you to see your current resolution and the optimal resolution that you will be wanting to run at. Now, with the OSD section out of the way, we're going to get on to gaming performance. And before we do so, if you like detailed reviews like this one, do consider subscribing. It's very much appreciated. Now the reason I'm going to start with casual gaming is because here the monitor might appeal for those people who are not playing Twitch-based or FPS games such as, let's say, Counter-Strike or Valorant. In this respect, the monitor has a 1900R curvature, which gives you a little bit of extra immersion. When I was playing Beach Buggy Racing 2, which is quite a little fun game that reminds me of Lego Racers, it gave me a little bit of extra immersion when playing, and that extra peripheral vision is definitely appreciated. You don't really notice too much extra kind of curvature given the size of the monitor, which is around 34 inch. Now elsewhere, you'll also want to know about AMD FreeSync and G-Sync. Now this has got AMD FreeSync certification, and while I don't have an AMD graphics card, I was able to plug this in via DisplayPort to my RTX 2080 Super, and I was able to run G-Sync, in other words the Pendulum demo. I took it that step further and I actually played some Destiny 2 with HDR and G-Sync all simultaneously running at 144Hz at 1440p, and all of these combined worked flawlessly. I had no problems whatsoever. For those people who are wondering, yes, I can kind of certify that this will run on G-Sync. But of course, your mileage may vary, as they say, because it really would depend in terms of the graphics card that you are running. Now on the subject of Destiny 2, this gives me the perfect chance to talk about its HDR performance. And here the monitor is disappointingly certified to HDR 400. Therefore, it doesn't reach over 400 nits, and we'll talk about that in just a bit in terms of the brightness segment. But what I will say here is that if you want to add an HDR signal, you can do so, and it will support it. However, it's not going to set your world alight, and for PC gamers out there, you might actually prefer to run it without HDR altogether, because it will give you a little bit of better color accuracy. That's just my opinion, of course, so you might actually want to really use HDR, specifically if you're on console. Now here, for console gamers, you'll be pleased to know that the monitor does accept a 4K signal. At least when I was testing it via my 4K Blu-ray player, I was able to run a 4K signal without any issues. And as a result means that this monitor will probably take your PS5's or Xbox's input via 4K and be it either downscale it to 1440p or just give you a pure 4K output. Your mileage may vary, and I'm not a console gamer, so I can't attest to that. I'm just sharing you my experiences. Now, while I'm not a console gamer, I am pretty much a hardcore PC gamer. By that I mean, I like playing competitive Twitch-based games such as Counter-Strike, which is pretty much taxing on any monitor in terms of input lag and response time. And here I put it through its paces on CSGO Deathmatch, and I found that my performance was, well, bang on average. The reason I say that is because in comparison to a non-ultra-wide format, I would be doing a lot better on a monitor that's very much, well, suited for competitive gaming. This monitor, however, does a very good job. It's pretty competent in this respect, whereby it gives you very little inverse ghosting, and as a result means that you can really dial down the overall response time of the monitor and dial up the AMA, because it kind of works the other way around. And furthermore here, the input lag of the monitor is acceptable. Again, is it a monitor that I would personally use for competitive gaming, specifically when you're talking about, let's say, global rank on CSGO? No. Is it a monitor that I can see myself recommending for more casual gamers, or indeed for those people who want a good overall gaming experience? Yes. So hopefully that makes sense. If you've got any questions, however, when it comes to gaming monitors, or indeed you want to see some suggestions, do check them down in the description below. With the gaming section out of the way, let's get on to image quality. And this is going to be very much important because it will give you the best gaming experience, of course, depending on the mode you use. And furthermore, will be important for those people who want to use this for professional work, be it for image editing or, let's say, video grading. Now, if you didn't watch my OSD section, I very much suggest you do so, because there's a few different settings here that I'll be talking about, which might not make any sense if you haven't seen the OSD section, so definitely do scroll back if you haven't watched it, or if you did, happy days, now you'll understand what I'm talking about. Now with the custom mode and with simulation profile off, you can see over here that the monitor has a wide color gamut. It has a pretty impressive sRGB, Adobe RGB and DCI-P3 coverage, and while it's a little bit overzealous in most of them, you can see it's pretty impressive. If, however, you were to use sRGB mode, you can see it very much tries to tailor it to the sRGB gamut profile. In other words, giving you 98.7% in gamut coverage and being a little bit overzealous at 104.2% in the gamut volume. If you were to enable the simulation profile, you can see over here the numbers get a little bit tightened up just a little bit more. Of course, your mileage may vary depending on what you get. But of course, just sRGB gamut coverage and volume is important, but what about the color accuracy? Now in sRGB mode, it's actually ridiculously impressive, and an average DLTE of 0.69 and a maximum of 1.62 with a contrast ratio that hovers between 850 to 900 to 1, which is okay, but not great for an IPS panel. What I'm trying to say over here is to do with the contrast ratio rather than the overall delta E, which is pretty much absolutely staggeringly beautiful for a monitor of its class. Now, if you were to disable sRGB mode, and as I said before, it's less color accurate in terms of its custom modes, here you can see that the average DLTE sits at around 3.47 with a maximum of 9.05. Yet again, contrast ratio varies between 850 to 900 to 1, and no matter in terms of if you enable or disable the simulation profile, the sRGB color accuracy remains the same. Now, if you had a keen eye during the calibration reports, you have noticed the maximum amount of luminance, in other words, maximum brightness that the monitor achieves, be it in sRGB mode or custom mode, is 200 nits. In terms of its minimum brightness here, in either mode it's around 70 nits. To me, that's fine for most use cases. However, if you have bright sunlit room or you're living in bright ambient light conditions, then you'll find that 200 nits just doesn't suffice. Now, oddly, if you enable blur reduction, because normally it's the complete opposite, the brightness gets up to 300 nits and even gets as low as 21 nits. I say this is odd because normally when you enable motion blur, or let's say blur reduction mode, it will effectively cap the brightness and therefore mean that you get lower brightness. But oddly, this seems to be the opposite effect. Now, as I mentioned in the HDR section, that here the maximum amount of brightness that I got was 380 nits. Ignore the 400 nits just above it because that's my laptop's brightness level, because I have to use an external display, an external system in order to look at its HDR performance. And as I mentioned, I connect over a 4K Blu-ray player and had a test disc with a 10% white square in a black background, which is normally how you get the most amount of brightness from a monitor or even a TV. Now further, in terms of my disappointment with the monitor in terms of its brightness, is its brightness uniformity. And here I know it's going to be panel lottery, but in my case it is pretty severely off, specifically towards the right side of the monitor. As for backlight bleed, is perfectly acceptable for an IPS panel. I didn't have too much of a problem or inherent issue. But again, that brightness uniformity will be a sticking point, not for gamers, but actually mainly for those people who are going to be using this monitor for professional work. And so this all leads me on to my verdict, and throughout this review there's been some pros and cons. On one hand, the monitor for professionals, in other words professional image editors or video graders, is that the sRGB color accuracy is really impressive for a ultra-wide format. Furthermore, in terms of its different modes, it allows you to play around with whatever you want. On the flip side, for professionals, again, the monitor won't be good in terms of its brightness uniformity, and the peak brightness is similarly disappointing. As for gamers, which I think this is going to be the majority of people who are watching this review, here you'll like to know that its gaming performance is perfectly adequate, and its image will pop in terms of colors, be it if you're running on sRGB mode or not. However, its HDR limitations are going to be leaving you a little bit disappointed. And furthermore, given the monitor costs $900/$1,000, you might be expecting a little bit more. So as a result, I can't see myself recommending it at the time of making this video. Of course, in the future, the prices of this monitor might drop and therefore might make it a little bit more easy to recommend, specifically when it comes to gamers. But at this time, I would suggest looking at the description below, be it if you're a gamer or not. There's some monitors out there which are cheaper and still come in the ultra-wide format and give you a fantastic gaming experience. And for those professionals out there, there are other monitors out there, be it at this price point or below, that you should consider instead, because effectively you don't need 144 Hz. So that's just my thoughts and opinions of it. Of course, you might agree or disagree, so do let me know in the comments below. Effectively, my reviews are all unbiased, independent, and effectively try and give you an informed purchasing decision. I'm not making it for you, I'm just doing the video so then you can make your own decision as to if the product, in this case a monitor, is good or not. Now, if you want to see more from the channel, do consider subscribing if you haven't already, and hit that bell notification as it's very much appreciated. And furthermore, do let me know in the comments below what you make of this monitor. Alright, I've been Totally Dubbed, take care of yourselves, and goodbye.